Yo, what's up everybody? How's it going? This video is brought to you by Magic the Gathering. I know, crazy, isn't it? So, the good folks from Magic the Gathering reached out and were like, hey, can you make us a video for the release of Magic the Gathering Arena, which is today. Magic the Gathering Arena is officially releasing today, which of course is their free-to-play digital version of Magic the Gathering. There's a link down below where you can go ahead and sign up and play and all of that good stuff. But, I was kind of thinking, okay, cool. So, what kind of video do I make there? Well, the biggest problem I always have whenever I start a new card game is I always feel like I don't have an understanding of the meta. I can learn the rules really quickly, and honestly, everybody's played Magic the Gathering before, right? And even if you haven't, they have a really good tutorial that explains everything fine. So, I don't want to explain the rules to you. You can figure those out yourself. But the meta is always really difficult because I queue and then I'm like, oh my god, I just got wrecked by something and don't even know what it is and what it does. What is that deck? What are good decks? What should I be playing? What is everybody else playing? I don't know any of these things. So I thought I could help you with that. I went and grabbed all of the top tier meta decks, right? And I'm gonna show them to you. And then hopefully afterwards you'll feel a little bit more confident going into this new environment. So you feel like you actually, kind of know what's happening and all of that. All right, that sounds good? Perfect. 2 disclaimers. First, I didn't do Flash and Vampires, in case you know what those are. Those are 2 decks. I don't have any experience with them. That's really the main thing. I don't want to give you bad information. Secondly, I really hope this information will be useful for the whole 10 days until Standard rotates. I think it's more than 10. I'm not entirely sure, but Standard rotates really soon. So if you see this sometime in the future, then this might be outdated. But today, this is up to date. All right, cool. Let's get started then. The first deck we're going to talk about is Bant Scapeshift. Bant, of course, describing the 3 colors, being green, blue, and white, and Scapeshift describing Scapeshift. Although we're actually not going to talk about Scapeshift right now. Instead, we're going to talk about Field of the Dead. So Field of the Dead is really what this whole deck is based upon. All right. So what Field of the Dead does, it's a land, it enters tapped, it doesn't give any card mana. So far it's terrible. But it has an effect. And that effect is if you have 7 different lands in play, and then you play another land, Field of the Dead spawns a 2/2 zombie. Now, this 2/2 zombie may not sound that impressive, but the idea here is, well, you can have multiple Fields of the Dead in play, and then we have a lot of different lands, right? So these are all different lands. So the idea is we have more than 1 Field of the Dead in play. Ideally, we have 4. So whenever we play a land now, we get 4 2/2 zombies. Great, cool, awesome. Then we have a deck that's really based around getting a lot of land out really quickly. So this right here is a creature that lets us play another land. This lets us draw a card and play another land. This lets us search for a land in the top 5 cards of our deck and play it. This right here lets us search for a land in our deck and play it. Or 2. You can do it for 2 as well. Or this right here lets us search for 2 lands and play them, right? So the idea is that we get a ton of land out really, really quickly. Then we have Scapeshift. That's what the deck is named after. What does Scapeshift do? Scapeshift lets you sacrifice lands that you control and then search your deck for different lands and put them all onto the board. So the strategy is first, we just get any lands we can into play. We've got the Grazer and the Growthspire and this and this and this and this. Right? And all of this just gets as many lands into play as we possibly can. And then we play Scapeshift to sacrifice them all, get out 4 Fields of the Dead, ideally. Ideally, we do this when we have 10 lands in play. So we get out 4 Fields of the Dead, 6 other lands. As this all enters the field, all of them count as entering the field, as Field of the Dead is also entering the field and is on the field. I know it sounds kind of weird. Point being, we get 40 zombies. Turns out 40 zombies is really damn good. It's really, really scary, and that's exactly what the plan is. Now, there are some other things in here that we really need to pay attention to. So the first one is Hydroid Crisis. What does Hydroid Crisis do? Hydroid Crisis is a green and a blue and an X. X can be however much you want. But what Hydroid Crisis also does is for every X you pay, right, this creature gets +1/+1. It starts at 0/0, so you gotta, kind of put a little bit in there. But it also, for half the mana you spend, you draw a card and gain life. So if I spend 10 mana, I draw 5 cards and gain 5 life. And it's also got flying and trample. So let's say I spend 10 mana and then the blue and the green, I will get a 10/10 that's flying, trample, draws me 5 cards, gains me 5 life. That's really powerful. So we got 4 of those, and you're going to see a lot more of Hydroid Crisis today. And then we have Teferi, Time Reveler. Teferi, first of all, our opponents can't cast things at instant speed anymore, only at sorcery speed. So that's really important. They can't play cards during our turn, only during their main phases. Secondly, we can use one of his abilities to make it so we can cast sorceries at instant speed, meaning we can cast Scapeshift during our opponent's turn. And then lastly, we can send one creature, artifact, or enchantment back to its owner's hand, meaning we can use it as removal, or we can use it to send something like, for example, this Rejuvenator back to our hand to use it again, and then we draw a card. Teferi is absolutely insane. We will also see a lot more of him today, and he's just very, very powerful. Synergizes very well with Scapeshift because we can use this to block our opponent from playing stuff, to counter Scapeshift, and also to make it so that we play our Scapeshift at the end of their turn, blocking instant speed removal, and then just attacking with 40 zombies all at once. So let's get into some games. Now, before we get into gameplay footage, I want to really briefly mention that most of the footage I'm going to be showing you today is sped up, actually sped up by quite a bit. That's because if I didn't do that, we would be here forever. The video is already really long as is, and I wanted to keep it shorter. And I felt like that would be alright, because, you know, I'm explaining everything as we go along. So I hope that's not a problem. Thank you. So, in our first game here, we got ourselves... you know, just a pretty decent hand. We got some lands. We got Scapeshift already, which is pretty much what we're looking for, right? Like, right now, at this stage, we're really just hoping to find general lands, you know, get as much into play as we possibly can, as quickly as we possibly can. So, our opponent already drops a Planeswalker. That's fine, right? Mostly what we're concerned about with our deck is we just don't want to die. I know it sounds kind of specific, or well, I guess not really so, but yeah, anyway, point being, enemy plays a 10-10, it's fine, we have Teferi, we can just bounce it back. That's one of the reasons why Teferi is so good, right? We can just use that to keep going. Out comes Nissa. We'll see more from Nissa today as well, but we'll get to that later. Nissa creates a free creature out of a land, so which it can also immediately attack, which is really scary, so Teferi gets killed, but that's alright. Not too big of a deal. And right there, we got another Planeswalker coming out. Look at that. Look at how much is already on the board. But that's fine, because our priority, again, is really just to also take our own time and fill our board with lands. So you can see we already have 7 in play. And we got ourselves our first zombie, so that's perfect. Oh, this is where it starts getting scary, though. Look at that. That's an 8-7. Ooh, that's a big boy. And then our opponent gets a 19-19. Holy damn. 2020 now. That Hydra is huge, right? Absolutely massive. 22, and it just keeps getting bigger, right? Our opponent is now pressuring us with a lot of damage. But this is where it starts being fun for us as well, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get a little bit more land out there. Why not? Then we'll get ourselves some zombies, play another land, get another zombie, and then we Scapeshift. Alright, that's what it's called after all. So, with Scapeshift, we're going to go ahead and select ourselves our 9 lands. We ideally would select 10, but we already have a Field of the Dead. We naturally don't want to sacrifice that. So, we're going to go ahead and just select 9, and then we're going to start searching our deck. The only thing that we really need to take care of here is that we don't accidentally select a land twice, right? We have a lot of different lands in the deck. We just want to make sure that every land, apart from the Fields of the Dead, is a unique one. And then this happens. I mean, woo, y'all like zombies? Because I got some zombies for you. So our opponent is now in a situation where there's just a lot of zombies coming at them. There's a lot of zombies coming at them. And yeah, so you got to think about it this way, right? We now have 40 zombies in play. And our opponent... well, they have got a 22 and 22, but 40 zombies, 2 2s, that's actually like an 80-80 worth of stats, except it's distributed really nicely, and we can actually like, you know, use it really nicely. So it makes it a little bit difficult for our opponent to really deal with this. Even if you attack with a 22-22 like that, well, our zombies will actually be able to fight that pretty effectively. Like, it wouldn't really be an issue. So you can see our opponent is really thinking it through and saying, what do we do here? What can you do? What's best? Another thing you gotta keep in mind is that our opponent, even though they have huge creatures, even if those huge creatures were to attack, we can block them. And if they don't attack, you can't really block our horde because it's not one creature, it's 40 creatures. There are only 9 of them to come through. All right, one of them got turned into a 0/2. But what about the other 39? So to block that, you need 31 blockers. And from what I can tell, you got 5? Yeah, that's game. And that's what makes Scapeshift so powerful. Very frequently, you will see people concede as soon as the Scapeshift comes out. They won't even wait, right? And Scapeshift is really like a meta-warping deck, where a lot of decks play cards specifically to counter Scapeshift, deal with it, have things that can function as a way to kind of like address it. Now, Scapeshift doesn't entirely rely on the combo though. So for example, right here in this game, we're playing against Esper Control, and Esper Control just drew a card that it showed us that we know will deal with our zombies. It gives all creatures -2/-2. So looking at that, I'm like, okay, well, I could try and get a big Scapeshift off. But if I do that, it will put me into a situation where, well, we can't really, like keep going in that stage, because Scapeshift does require you to put a lot of lands into play all at once. And then they aren't in your deck. You can't really Scapeshift twice a game, maybe twice, but never 3 times, right? So what I'm doing instead is I'm just applying pressure, right? What I'm using is just kind of like generation of power, right? I've got my Hydroid Crazies, I've got some zombies, I'm going to go ahead and play a Teferi and bounce back my 1/1 to go ahead and create another zombie, right? And doing this just puts enough pressure on the board that our opponent feels like, you know what? For the ratio, oh god, look at that hand, and then they just quit out. That's not a crazy outcome for a Scapeshift deck, right? The great thing is that it's got huge combo potential if you think now is the time to go for it. Then it also got the ability to just kind of take it a little bit easier and apply more constant pressure if it chooses to. Next up is a kind of an alternate way to play Field of the Dead. So this is Yarok Field. It mostly, again, runs 4 fields of the deck, and that's kind of like the main focus of the deck. But it centers itself around a different approach. So it still has Grazer and Growth Spiral and Rejuvenator. Still has those. But instead, it has Risen Reef instead of going for something like Scapeshift. So Scapeshift, is very kind of bursty, where it puts everything on the board all at once. Risen Reef is more steady. What this card does is, whenever Risen Reef or another elemental enters the battlefield, you can look at the top card of your deck, see if it's a land. If it is a land, you can put it on the board, and if it isn't, you can just put it into your hand. This is really powerful, especially if you play a lot of other elementals, which we do. So we have the Cavalier of Thorns. What Cavalier of Thorns does, it lets us look at the top 5 cards of our deck, choose a land, and then put it onto the board. And if it dies, we can put a card from our graveyard on top of our deck. Really great, because it allows us to kind of like make sure we have good draws, and again, it ramps us. But also being a huge body, as you can see, it's a 5/6. It's really, really strong. Also an elemental, meaning it will trigger the Risen Reef. So you can see those two allow us to really quickly get a lot of lands into play. On top, of course, Elvish, Rejuvenator, Growth Spiral, Grazer, all of that stuff. But the deck is called Yarok Field. We have Yarok the Desecrated. So Yarok the Desecrated is a 5-mana creature. Death Touch Lifelink, 3/5. So that's alright. But the important thing is whenever, while Yarok is in play, whenever like an effect would trigger because something enters the battlefield, it triggers twice. Meaning, Yarok also an elemental, by the way. If I have Risen Reef in play, I play Yarok, then actually the Risen Reef effect triggers twice. If I have enough lands in play for Field of the Dead, I play a land, I get 2 zombies, right? Or if I have 4 Fields of the Dead, I play a land, I get 8 zombies. And that's really what this deck kind of bases itself on. It bases itself on the idea of not really going for these huge bursty plays where you have, where you put all of your resources onto the board and just try to kill your opponent with that. Instead, it tries to kind of build an advantage by getting these incredible, valuable plays where you get so much power out of simple things like playing a land or just playing any creature, really, right? So Yarok, very powerful. It does cost 5 mana though, but that's fine because we play so much ramp. So you can see how that all comes together. We got some other stuff like some removal here, and then another card that lets us pull some stuff from our discard pile. So this deck is also a lot more sturdy. It won't fall as easily to land destruction or something like that. Anyway, let's have a look at it. So, we got ourselves a pretty nice looking hand. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. This deck is a little bit not quite as meta as probably most of the other decks that I have shown you, but I think this one is noteworthy. Mostly because I really enjoy playing it a lot, but I don't know. I actually think it's very good. So you'll see in a second why though. So our opponent already applying a lot of pressure here. You know, we've got that Hero of Precinct 1, which is just a strong creature that creates an additional creature. We've got Deputy of Detention, that kind of like trap stuff, right? Variation of Esper Control right here, a bit more aggressive. But we'll throw down a Cavalier of Thorns. So you can see we are now starting to actually get some zombies into play. Nice. Right, that feels really good. Cavalier goes back into the deck. That's fine. And overall, we're kind of looking good. But that's where Yarok comes in. So we'll go ahead and play a Field of the Dead. Keep in mind, everything triggers twice. Now we're getting 6 zombies for every land we play. Look at that. Isn't that crazy? Right? Our opponent is going to try and discard our hand away in just a second. But you can see we already have a lot of zombies. And it's just gonna get worse. That's exactly what I was talking about, right? We aren't really using up resources the same way we did with Scapeshift. Instead, with this deck, it's a lot more steady. And nonetheless, it is brutal, right? You can see Yarok now makes the Cavalier of Thorns trigger twice, and he just got another 18 zombies. So now we got 29 zombies in play. I mean, that's enough to kill. You see how quick that goes? Yeah, Field of the Dead is an absolutely insane card. And honestly, standard as is right now is very much defined by it. You will see a lot of Field of the Dead. So right here, we're going up against what looks like another Scapeshift deck. So that's, you know, scary. We just saw how powerful those can be. While looking at our hand, all right, cool. That seems all right. We'll go ahead and play a Risen Reef. Nice, we got another one. The Risen Reef, as you can see, it's just always valuable. You always get at least a little bit of value out of it. So we go and play another Risen Reef. Perfect. Go ahead, reveal some cards, get ourselves another land into play so that Yarok is starting to look nice. Oh, there's the big removal. Okay. Like that's a removal card you can play in Field of the Dead if you want to, or Scapeshift, sorry. But I don't know. In my list, I don't have it. It's not because it's bad. It's just, I don't know. I just don't have it. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and keep throwing down Yaroks. We've got plenty of them, luckily. Our opponent starting to kind of be a little bit scary of all of their zombies. But you know what? We got a few zombies too. So let's go ahead and just start throwing down Elvish Rejuvenator, which again, this has synergy with Yarok. That's what makes Yarok so good. Look at that. We just got ourselves 16 zombies in a turn. Now opponent, yeah, they know it's over. I've really been enjoying playing this deck. I would very much recommend it. I really, really like it. So anyway, let's move on then. Our next deck here uses a lot of cards we're already familiar with and kind of tries to do some similar stuff, although it is not a Field of the Dead yet, Field of the Dead list. So we got ourselves Bant Aggro. How does this work? Well, we got ourselves some key cards that we already know. Right? We have Teferi, we know what he does. We've got Risen Reef, we've got Hydroid Crisis. All absolutely fantastic, very powerful. But we don't play a Field of the Dead. Instead, we have Llanowar Elves, Leafkin Druids, and Paradise Druid. All 3 of these creatures allow us to add more mana to our mana pool, allowing us to get to higher mana cards faster. What cards are we trying to get to? Well, we're trying to get to Nissa, who shakes the world. That's really the big one. What Nissa does is, first of all, whenever we tap a forest, we gain additional mana. Cool, that's already very powerful. But you can also use Nissa to turn your lands into free creatures that have haste and vigilance and can immediately attack. Very powerful. Nissa just is a constant threat that's very difficult to deal with. Also, if she uses her ultimate at -8, you can also make your lands indestructible, meaning that those lands that you just turned into creatures, those lands that we just turned into creatures now can't be killed anymore. Other than that, we've got Trostani Discordant, which is just like a nice creature that lets us fight a little bit, makes all of our stuff a little bit stronger with +1/+1s. We've got Deputy of Detention. We saw that guy a little bit earlier. What this guy does is he traps a creature away until he gets destroyed. So it's a fantastic tool for just kind of keeping a little bit of board control. Not only because he traps one creature away, he actually traps everything away with the same name. It can also be a Planeswalker or an enchantment, anything like that. So, and then finally, this is what we are using all of our mana for, right? So we've got tons of mana generation with Llanowar Elves, Druids, Paradise Druid, Risen Reef, Nissa. What do we use it for? Well, Hydroid Crisis, as we already mentioned. But then we have Voracious Hydra, which is just a big boy that enters with X +1/+1 counters, which you can either double, so it's like super big, or you can make it fight something, which is also really nice. And then, of course, Trample. So huge creature with Trample is always powerful. And then Finale of Glory. Finale of Glory is the kind of card you will never get to see because your opponents will concede as you play it. What it does is it lets you spend X mana as well as 2 white to create X 2/2 creatures. But if you spend more than 10 on the X, so if you would get more than 10 2/2 creatures, you also get 10 4/4 flyers, which is massive, right? So with all of our ramp, with all of our mana, we can create this huge board of creatures that will hopefully be incredibly overwhelming. So yeah, let's have a look. So right here, we got ourselves a pretty good hand, you know. Got Teferi, which is always nice. We got some lands. Sadly, none of our ramp, but we do have a Deputy of Detention, which is always very useful. Then our opponent throws out 2 creatures with the same name. Oh, hell yeah, that's perfect. That's what we're looking for, right? So that gives us a little bit of leeway right here. It just makes us a little bit safer. We throw out a Teferi. I throw that creature back. I probably shouldn't have done that. You know, looking at it back now, it's a mistake. That's okay. You know, not everything goes flawlessly. So Risen Reef comes out. We know how scary that can be. And then the Jade Light Rager. Not too much that we need to worry about. So at this stage, you can already kind of see what this deck does though. Like we are putting a lot of stuff on the board, right? There's just a lot of creatures here. And that's just going to kind of keep going. So the Risen Reefs, you know, again, they are elementals, so they trigger themselves. And now we are going to be starting to draw and ramp like crazy. Right? There's going to be so much happening. Our opponent, they actually got a pretty big board too. And they do also have Risen Reefs, which is kind of scary. We'll go ahead and grab ourselves some more of those. Oh my god. Leafkin Druids are also elementals, so they trigger the Risen Reef. And I'm actually getting a little bit unlucky here by getting a lot of cards, not really any lands. You know, like I would be able to put lands straight on the board. The cards I just have to play. But oh well. Our opponent returns our Deputy of Detention to our hand, which triggers the Risen Reefs, because those guys are trapped. They are elementals. So that's a little bit scary, but nothing too crazy, right? And there's Yarok. So that tells us a lot more about the deck. It tells us that we do definitely have to be careful. We just saw how powerful Yarok can be. So Yarok is really something that's just, yeah, scary. Right here, our opponent gives us some good blocks. You know, keep in mind, you can always double block and all of that stuff. And yeah, just looking at it, I'm like, okay, cool. What can we do here? I'm trying to make sure that I use my mana properly. I want to play a Nissa, but Nissa doubles the mana we gain from forests. So I want to make sure I don't accidentally kind of like waste that, right, by using a forest before I play Nissa. So we go ahead and play 2 deputies, which will immediately, you know, just kind of apply some pressure here. And then we're going to start swinging with Nissa, right? Nissa, of course, creates this just nice stream of power by always allowing us to put these new creatures on the board every turn. Of course, we do have oh god, look at these men, look at this army for some reason. Of course, we got so much on the board right now. It's just kind of crazy. Oh man. But hey, I mean, it's working for us. Our opponent being fairly defensive. Of course, you would be worried. Now, I know our board looks insane, and it kind of is, but something that we're lacking is really damage. Like, as much as we have a lot of stuff, the stuff that we do have just isn't that powerful. Not because they not because they're bad. That's not it. They just don't really do that much. But that's okay. Right here, my Nissa gets attacked by the Hydroid Crisis. I just activated my Teferi, which now allows me to cast that Finale of Glory at the end of my turn. Or end of their turn, sorry. Which is really nice, and especially seeing that my Teferi survived, I thought it would be best to just let the Nissa die. Right, as Nissa dies, we can still use Finale of Glory for a ton of creatures. And really the main important thing here is that Teferi survives. Right? And so I'll just kind of let the turn pass. You can see we have infinite mana. Even without Nissa there. With Nissa there, we would have a little bit more, but it's not that important. Now, our opponent is just kind of going nuts with things as well a little bit, just putting a ton of stuff on the board really, really quickly. I mean, this is all just enabled by the power of, like the really, really scary cards that we currently have in standard, like Hydroid Crazies and the Risen Reef. Anyway, I go ahead and start counting. I think we get to 16. And as my opponent sees, oh, okay, Finale of Glory, they just GG out. So that's fairly understandable, I feel. All right, we got ourselves another game right here. Got a decent enough hand. Quick Leafkin Druid. There's, of course, always the chance that we get really lucky and we draw an early Nissa. Right? That's really what we're looking for. Cool. Got ourselves Teferi into play now. Just being a bit careful. Don't want to like -3 to draw a card right now. Just kind of want to see what happens first. I'll keep my Teferi face. And oh, look at that. We did draw that early Nissa. Perfect. So Nissa going to start immediately swinging. And this is what makes it good. So you can see right here, our opponent's actually going to immediately kill Nissa. But because Nissa continuously puts these 3/3 creatures on the board, she's just still here. We never lost her. That's exactly the power that makes her so good. The fact that even after she gets destroyed, she still just continuously produces a lot of value. Oh, look at that. There's another one. So we're going to go ahead and just get ourselves a second Nissa into play and start swinging with that as well. Which is, yeah, it's just good, right? Go ahead and throw down a Teferi and a Deputy of Detention. Just kind of apply some pressure. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and create myself another forest. And again, these forests, you don't just have to deal with Nissa. You gotta deal with them too. Our opponent is starting to drop low. Legion's End. Looking at that, I probably should have played it so that I don't use the, creature creation from Nissa on 2 lands with the same name, because Legion's End is actually a very popular card that destroys everything with the same name. But that's okay, because in the end, we do still have our Nissa, right? Like, that's what makes her good. We always keep either the creature or the Planeswalker, unless our opponent plays like Star of Extinction, which is a crazy card that deals 20 damage to all creatures and Planeswalkers, but still. Most of the time you get to keep them. And as you can see, we're just kind of like in control. That's what we're doing. And that's really all we have to do. Ritual of Soot coming out, so that's a little bit scary. That kills all of our stuff. But while Ritual of Soot kills all of our creatures, it does not kill our Planeswalkers, right? So I can continue to use those, to continue to apply pressure, deny my opponent the crazy nonsense that they're obviously trying to do with whatever that is that's happening over there. And I'm just gonna keep throwing out more creatures. Legion's End comes out. Our opponent desperately searching for an answer to this Nissa. 4 Erasure comes out. Another 4 Erasure comes out. But our opponent doesn't have anything. And that's game. So that's really the power of Bant Aggro, right? It's a bit weird of an aggro deck. We're about to talk about a real aggro deck. But it's very powerful and just does a lot of work. Next up is Red Deck Wins. Yes, that's actually what it's called. I didn't come up with that. What is Red Deck Wins? Well, Red Deck Wins is very simple. It's a red deck, monocolored, pure red, and it wins. It's aggro. It is so aggro. What it does is this guy runs in immediately and attacks, and you can sacrifice it to deal 1 damage. This guy is a 1/2, and if you have 2 spells in your graveyard, it gets +1 and it has haste. All right, shoots a guy, shoots a guy, shoots a guy. All right, this right here lets us draw some cards after we did some damage. This right here shoots an opponent in the face and then has a 2/1 creature attached to it. Right, now this one is really one of the power cards here. So everything I just explained to, or like just briefly mentioned, like that's just the basics of it. But the spooky stuff is Runaway Steamkin, Goblin Chain Ruler, and Experimental Frenzy. So what does Runaway Steamkin do? It's a 2-mana 1/1, which is not that impressive. But every time you play a red spell, this guy gets +1/+1. And if you have 3 +1/+1 counters on it, which is the maximum it can have, then you can remove them to add 3 red mana, which, as you might guess, I can use to cast red spells. That's right. This guy kind of creates a loop with mana and cards. You can just play cards and use them to buff up this guy, and then you remove the buff from him to play more cards to buff him up again. It's crazy powerful. Gets out of hand very quickly. Goblin Chain Roller. 3 mana, 3/3. The first strike, which is already insane. And then it also deals 1 damage to everything your opponent has. So you get a little bit of damage in immediately. You can use it to trigger stuff like light up the stage, which is if you deal damage to an opponent this turn, it lets you draw 2 cards for 1 mana. Crazy good. but it deals 1 damage to everything they have, and then just a 3 mana, 3/3 with First Strike is god tier. And then finally, Experimental Frenzy. This is what makes this deck go crazy. You may look at the top card of your deck at any time, and you may play it. You can't play cards from your hand anymore, but turns out, just since we only play 20 lands, 2/3 of this deck is stuff. There's usually stuff at the top of our deck that we can play. And then we just drop an Experimental Frenzy and just start running our opponents over. And that's the idea. So this deck has very short games, because what it does is it wins. So, look at that. Doesn't this look juicy? Got ourselves a nice hand with some, good strong red spells right here. Good strong red cards. So we'll start with that casual 1/2, which, that doesn't really do much other than immediately swing for 2. Put our enemy down to 13. This right here is where you can see the 1 extra damage from the Chain Whirler really mattering. So if you are playing against red deck wins, you gotta keep in mind at any point it might be like 1 extra damage coming out of nowhere. Keep swinging, right? That's what we're here to do. Now we're playing against Scapeshift. And we saw earlier how strong that deck can be. But right here, it just does not matter. We keep going. Our opponent is down to 5. What can they do? They're trying to get their stuff going as quickly as possible, but it's just not going to be in time. It's just not going to be in time. Nowhere near fast enough. In the end, that's what this deck does, right? Mono red is really kind of a check on the metagame. The metagame needs to be able to beat mono red. If it can't beat mono red, then the metagame is not the metagame, because then mono red is the metagame. Does that make sense? Well, we got ourselves 2 Chain Whirlers here. We're playing against Vampires. Vampires is a really strong minion fighting deck, but that's, again, the Chain Whirlers, one of the strongest, absolutely most insane creatures, where we can get so much value out of it just by having it on the board. There's not a lot that can win a fight against a Chain Whirler. A Danto Vanguard is actually one of those creatures though, so our opponent kind of still threatening us a little bit. This turn right there is a little bit more complicated. We've got the Steamkin, which can allow us to generate mana. Keep that in mind, right? So I'm going to play the monkey, sacrifice the monkey, deal 1 damage to opponent, which lets me then play Squirtus Critics for cheaper. Puts my Steamkin at 4. I'm going to go ahead and use that to play the Gilto Lavarola, another Squirtus Critics, and you can see this is really one of the big strengths of the Steamkin, allowing you to play cards for cheaper than they really should be. And here we go, just go ahead and play that good old Chain Whirler, go ahead and cut down their board and swing in for another, 5. Our opponent looking pretty desperate. They can't fight into the Chain Whirler. First strike, making it impossible. And we take that win. This deck does not only rock against, slower decks. No. It's very strong across the board. You can see right here, immediately throws out the Diagonal Monkey. And it's called that for a reason. It's called that because it comes into play and it's immediately tapped. All right, our opponent going to go ahead and play a boy. Not too big of a problem because we just keep throwing stuff at them and they're at 8. Yeah, we're playing against another kind of like mid-rangey deck right here. This is not an early game deck. And this is where we see the power of the Experimental Frenzy. So we'll go ahead and throw that down, get ourselves a shock from the top, land, go ahead and play a Lava Runner, and then we just go face with all of that. We can sacrifice the monkey to make sure that creature doesn't do anything. Our opponent is at 2 HP, and it's over. Mono red is insane. Your deck needs to be able to stand up to mono red. Whenever you're playing, if you run into mono red and you lose, then it's probably not very good. Alright, next up, we've got one of my favorites actually, Junt Dinos. So, Junt being black, green, red, and Dinos being dinosaurs. Oh, crazy. So, how does this work? Well, turns out dinos are really big. So this right here is a dino, it's a 7/6, with a downside, but it's a 7/6 for free. Alright, and then other than that, we got dinos like a 4/5 right here, right, for 4 mana, 5/4 for 4 mana. They all have upsides too. Carnage Tyrant is 6 mana, 7/6, that's like spell-proof, hex-proof, there we go. Spell can't be countered, trample, all of that stuff. Galta, which is a 12/12 with trample. All of those are really big, but they are really enabled by 2 smaller cards. Actually, kind of 3 smaller cards. The first one being Commune with Dinosaurs. So that allows you to look at the top 5 cards of your deck and choose a land or a dinosaur. So it really allows you to like pick what you need in this situation, which is great. It's an incredible drawing tool. Then we've got Marauding Raptor. This is a It's kind of a spooky boy. So it's a 2-mana 2/3, which is already really good. But it makes all of your other cards cheaper, other creature cards cheaper. And then, when a creature comes into play, it deals 2 damage to them. And then if it's a dinosaur, it gets +2 attack. That allows you to immediately be a threat, even if you deal damage to them. But that can be an upside. For example, this guy right here draws a card when it takes damage. Then everybody else has got plenty HP. They're dinosaurs. They don't care about 2 damage. Then we got Huntmaster. This card is similar. It makes the dinos cheaper, but it's even more insane because it makes it so the dinos gain haste. So you play this, tap it, give a dino haste. It's insane, right? So you play this on 2, and then you play probably one of these for 4 mana on 3 because they want cheaper. Give them haste, and you immediately start swinging. And having these big creatures come running at you at Mach 5 is just a problem. Then we got Collision Colossus, which allows us to buff a dino or a creature for +4, +2, and give them trample. Very great for minion fighting. This deck really wants to minion fight a lot. Duress, just kind of like to interrupt possible disable or like removal from our opponent. It makes it so we can look at the hand and just discard something. And then we have FUD, which lets us sacrifice one of our creatures to deal damage to a target, probably the opponent's face, based on a creature's power. So, of course, we got some big boys, like a 12/12. FUD can sometimes be a 1-mana deal 12 damage. That's really good. So that's Dinos. It's fairly simple. This deck has fast games, and damn are they satisfying. So we got ourselves a pretty good starting hand here. Just a good old Hunt Master. That's what we're looking for. We want to enable our dinosaurs. Then commune with dinosaurs, again, lets us find what we're looking for, right? That's really what makes this deck good. The fact that we have the ability to enable the big guys and then just some really strong big guys. So we're going to go ahead and play a dino and immediately start swinging, right? Our opponent does actually have removal though. So Deputy of Detention coming out, getting rid of it. But we got another one. And it swings again. Our opponent though, no, our opponent isn't stupid. Our opponent got more removal, gets rid of that boy too. Well, turns out, my friend, I got dinos for days. And you can see, despite their best efforts, our opponents are already at 9 HP. All right, that's just not good. You need more than that. There's a Hydroid Crisis, like something of an attempt to have something that fights a little bit. That, by the way, was a little bit of a mistake from my end. I don't think I should have played that early. I should have waited a little bit longer. But that's okay, because in the end, it doesn't really matter. Because my boy is coming in anyway, and our opponent really gotta be ready for it, because if they aren't, it's starting to look grim. We kill one of the deputies of detention, gets ourselves a new dino. But our opponent isn't stupid. Our opponent has tools to deal with this. Time Wipe kills everything, but never mind. Shifting Ceratops has haste, comes in, takes him out. Right? Like, that's the power. It's just there's so much power always coming out. There's like no moment where this deck doesn't just overwhelm you. Right? We're playing against a very aggressive deck now. We're playing against Red Deck Wins, which I just showed you how scary that can be. All right, and our opponent got themselves a monkey. The monkey shoots us. Gonna go ahead and shoot our dinosaurs as they come in. You have to remove them. If you don't remove them, well, it's gonna get bigger, right? Okay, our opponent now gonna throw down a lot of creatures, desperately trying to still fight. Shifting Ceratops comes out, but Shifting Ceratops is fine. It's just gonna chill. Experimental Frenzy, okay, I respect that. I'm a little scared, but not too much, right? Because in the end, our opponent, if they attack now, they'll lose some stuff, right? And then I can swing back, and I swing back hard. Oh, hell yeah, I swing back hard. So looking at this situation, all right, I'm going to go ahead and tap that, and then just attack with my dinos. It's time to attack, all right? Now, one of them is a 2/3, which this 2/3 can become incredibly scary. So opponent decides to block, but nope, we got a combat trick. Oh, hell yeah, we do. And now Experimental Frenzy, opponent sadly, or guess luckily for us, didn't really get anything. And so we just swing in again, right, with all of our might. Colossus, making our big boy even bigger. And then a FUD, throw him at our opponent really quick. And an easy kill. And that's Dinos. I mean, what else is there to say? It's really fun to play. I mean, it's just satisfying. Just take some dinos and throw them at your opponent. Next up is a deck that I have to admit, it's not my favorite deck, but it is incredibly scary. So I really felt the need to show you. We got ourselves a Feather deck. Now, Feather is this guy. Feather the Redeemed. And that's what this is all about. What does Feather the Redeemed do? Well, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery that targets one of your creatures, you get it back at the end of the turn. Instead of entering the graveyard, it just comes back to your hand at the end of your turn. This is really powerful because you can use it with lots of spells that are useless on their own. Don't get me wrong. They're not good. These are not good spells. They only work in this deck. Like, for example, Defiant Strike. It gives a creature +1/+0 and draws you a card. You wouldn't ever see this in another deck. Like, it doesn't do anything. But in here, I can use this every turn to draw a card. That's insane. In here, I can use Gird for Battle every turn to give +1/+1 to 2 creatures. In here, I can use God's Willing to give my Feather protection from a color, meaning it can't be targeted by anything from the color. It can't take damage from anything by that color. And Feather doesn't die, right? So God's Willing also allows us to scry, allowing us to look at the top card of our deck and deciding if we want to keep it or if we want to put it at the bottom. That lets us, kind of filter what kind of cards we draw. Sheltering Light allows us to just make a creature invincible, like Feather, for example. All right, and then again, Scrying, Reckless Rage, a card that is laughably bad in any other deck, but in here, it deals 4 damage to an enemy creature, 2 damage to one of ours, that allows us to get it back. We can use it every turn to remove stuff. Then we have some just good stuff in general, right? Shock, Adanto Vanguard, Dreadhorde Arcanist. Adanto Vanguard is just a 2-mana 1/1 that gets +2 attack when it's attacking. Then you can sacrifice for life to make it indestructible until end of turn. So it's very sticky. And that's something that's kind of like a theme here, right? What we're trying to do is we're trying to either have a Feather in play, or we're trying to have other threats. With Legion Warbus, Krinkro, Aurelia, these are all in here, and that's really all you need to know about them, is that they are threats. They will eventually kill your opponent if your opponent doesn't do anything about them. So they exist just to kind of take the attention away from Feather. And then we have 10th District Legionnaire, which is another card that gets more powerful when you target it with a spell. So then a little bit more synergy there. Dreadhorde Arcanist allows us to get spells back from the graveyard to play them again, hopefully with Feather. That's the idea. This deck is very much centered around this one card, which is why I personally don't like playing it that much, because it feels like you really gotta get Feather for this to work. But when it works, oh my god, it's insane. Let me show you. So we got ourselves a pretty okay starting hand here. All right, we got ourselves a 10th District Legionnaire, which is just a little bit of early game pressure, which is good, right? So that boy has haste as a 2/2, and whenever you target it with a spell, it gets +1/+1, you get to Scribe on. It's actually very powerful. It's a very good card. Our opponent, Fodder Erasure, allows our opponent to look at our hand and discard a card, which is unfortunate. But we're going to go ahead and throw ourselves the Legion Warbus into play. As I mentioned earlier, it's just a threat. That's what it is. Crankle, same deal there. It's just a threat. And the good thing is it does actually make our opponent kind of deal with what we have, right? So you can see there's lots of removal coming out, and we find a Feather. Oh my god. Perfect. We have a Sheltering Light in hand. Our opponent throws down a creature. Really not that big of a deal. We can just discard a Shock, and there's Feather. So at this stage, we can now keep Feather safe. And that's what we want to do, right? Ideally, Feather does not die for the rest of the game. So our opponent is attacking. It's fine. We can double block. Not a big deal. There's Teferi. Cool. We're going to go ahead and just Sheltering Light just so we can scry one. Teferi can't kill anything, but it can be annoying. So, sucks a little bit that Teferi came out. But in the end, that's fine. We're going to go ahead and just play Feather, Sheltering Light as well. And we have a God's Willing on top of the deck. Now, this is really the scariest part of the game. Opponent has Teferi in play, so we can't play anything at instant speed. So we actually can't protect Feather right now, but luckily our opponent didn't have anything. That was really kind of a do or die moment, but luckily we survived. Now, we're in really good shape. Because we do have Feather on the board, so now I can just start playing these spells every turn to scry like crazy, right? Looking for a very specific card, which is exactly that one, Defiant Strike. Defiant Strike, as I showed earlier, it's not a very good card usually, but it is really good here because it lets us draw. Our opponent fought erasures us, but we can hide our instants away because Feather just kind of like brings them back at the end of the turn after we use them. So that allows us to make sure that Feather is always fine. Similarly, we're going to just now hide all of our stuff, or like use all of our stuff immediately and protect Feather from that Teferi, keeping our creatures safe and unkillable. Our opponent plays down a bunch of stuff, but it doesn't really matter because Feather is still standing and Feather isn't going to go anywhere. So we're going to go ahead and kill that Teferi. Then we're going to start shooting. Something we can do. Of course, Reckless Rage is a tool for aggression, right? And I'm just going to throw everything on Feather because honestly, at this stage, I was just feeling myself. This was not a good play. You don't get a moment like this every game. I mean, this is just fantastic. But yeah, Feather right now is indestructible, has protection from blue, has +1 attack. Yeah, and this is where I actually start putting more threats on the board, and it's time to start attacking. Our opponent doesn't really have anything, throws down a Teferi, but I'm like, oh, that's fine. Oh, Tyrant Scorn, cool. Well, whatever. We'll just Sheltering Light to scry, and God's Willing to protect it from blue, so that doesn't do anything. And that's it. That's game. So Teferi is absolutely, not Teferi, Feather is absolutely brutal once you get it out. But the deck, it does heavily rely on Feather, but it has other tools as well. So mostly these really kind of like strong, cheap creatures that can actually get some value out of those spells as well, out of your combat tricks. That's what they're commonly referred to, right? Like a spell that you use mid-combat to kind of surprise your opponent. So I'm going to go ahead and throw down Feather here. But our opponent, yeah, has something to deal with that. Frankly speaking, what I should have done is I should have waited until I had 1 more mana and then played Feather, because I did have a God's Willing in hand to be able to protect it. But the problem here is it's always difficult to know, well, when are you getting more mana? And in fact, in this particular game, I did not get mana for a very long time. So we're going to go and just keep swinging in with these cheaper creatures. Our opponent plays a Shock, plays another Shock to get rid of the Dreadhorde Arcanist, which again lets us get stuff back from the graveyard. I doesn't want to risk that. In the meantime, I'm going to continue using my Adanta Vanguard to just kind of trade favorably, right? It's really, really good at that. Our opponent, 2 10th District Legionnaires. I got also Shock, which is pretty good. And then we're going to just go ahead and keep swinging. I mean, it's kind of a race, but sometimes you got to race because you're going to win. And so we do. So that's Feather. Feather is a pretty popular deck, to be honest. I think people just like, you know, having that unkillable creature. It's very powerful. The trick to playing against Feather is really you want to keep 2 removals. 2 removal spells and then play one, then they protect it and then play the second one. And then just hope that they don't have a second protection spell, because if they do, you lose. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to our last deck. So this is our last deck for today. This is Esper Control. Esper Control has a few pieces we already recognize. First one being Teferi. Alright, we know Teferi. We have seen him plenty. Then a card that we saw a little bit of is Fort Erasure. So Fort Erasure, we look at their hand and we discard a card. Can't be a land, but yeah. Very powerful. Just kind of allows you to control things before they even happen. Personally, find it a little bit frustrating to play against, but playing with it, oh man, it's a little juicy for sure. But this deck is mostly kind of centered around 2 big cards, which are the Basilica Bellhaunt, which is a 4-mana 3/4 that makes your opponent discard and you gain 3 life. So this is immediately a 1-for-1. It heals you, and then it's also a good body to trade with. And then, most importantly, Kaya's Wrath. Kaya's Wrath is a 4-mana destroy all creatures. It's insane. It's very good, very powerful, right? So Kaya's Wrath is the kind of spell that really allows you to play this kind of very slow controlling deck. The idea of this deck isn't so much to win the game. It's more so to stop your opponent from winning the game long enough that they concede. You can win with it as well. So you have a Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Teferi is a 5-mana Planeswalker, lets you draw cards, lets you shuffle stuff your opponent has back into the deck. And then also if you have 8 loyalty on him, which is very difficult to do, but once you do, you get an emblem that wins you the game. It doesn't strictly say it wins you the game, but whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent opponent controls, you can exile lands. Once you get this, you win the game 99% of the time. Then we have Narset, stops your opponent from drawing cards. You can choose a card to add into your hand. Elder Spell destroys planeswalkers, as many as you like. Legion's End, that's something that is in here to, first of all, deal with just kind of like cheaper creature decks, but mostly to deal with any Field of the Dead decks. Field of the Dead, of course, being very, very powerful. We saw that earlier, and this right here lets you destroy or exile a creature, and then exile anything that has the same name. So the zombies from Field of the Dead, they're all gone. Cast down just to destroy something. Search for Skanta lets us kind of filter our library for good stuff. I'm not going to get into the details of that because it's not that important right now. But yeah, then we have Commander Dreadhorde. This is one card that just kind of lets you, get some value out of having stuff in the graveyard. What this does is it lets you choose stuff from the graveyard, summon it. You take damage based on how much mana that would cost normally, but it's still really kind of a nice tool for getting a lot of power on the board all at once. We only play one of them because we don't have any really way to heal. We do have some healing. We have Oath of Kaya and Basilica Bellhound, which Oath of Kaya does 3 damage and then heals you for 3. Whenever an opponent attacks a planeswalker you control, you deal 2 damage to them and then you heal for 2. So that's really good, but it does have the downside of kind of being legendary. So, you can only have one of them in play. It's also 3 mana. Point being, it's kind of like a one-time effect. Your opponents, hopefully can't continuously attack your planeswalkers. If that is the case, you have a different problem. Either way, Commander Dreadhorde can kind of win the game as well. But yeah, the idea of this deck is just to slowly drown your opponent out. Make it so they can't do anything anymore and then just win because they are out of options. So right here, we got ourselves, a pretty good starting hand. Kind of looking all right. We're going up against a green deck, it seems. So Legion's End immediately. That lets me have a look at their hand as well, which is good. Kind of want to know what's going on there. And we're going to go ahead and drop a Teferi. Our opponent plays a pretty big creature, 5/4. Something that's definitely something we want to be a bit wary of. We do have the advantage of, having pretty good starting hand and also having this Narset that allows us to kind of fish for some more cards. We now have 2 Kaya's Wraths in hand, and that's a great tool for just generally staying in control here, right? So we'll be able to clear out those creatures, which feels good. And now our opponent is already starting to look a little bit short on cards. But so are we. So we're going to go ahead and play a Commander Dreadhorde, get ourselves the 2 planeswalkers back that we threw away earlier. Grab a cast down just so we have a nice tool for, just kind of general fighting, I guess. And then our opponent is going to go ahead and get some more creatures on the board. So this is pretty scary. We'll kill our planeswalkers. It's actually pretty good for us. I was very happy when my opponent did that because honestly, I don't think that's the right play. But yeah, I'm trying to keep the Nissa's loyalty low. We don't want it to use its ultimate. That would make the creatures generated by Nissa indestructible, and that would be a problem. But, ooh, look at that. That's a lot of power coming our way. All right. But we're looking pretty good. Oh, perfect. Look at that. So, Kaya's Wrath destroys all creatures. And then the Elder Spell destroys all planeswalkers. How beautiful is that? We go out and get ourselves a little bit more loyalty on our Teferi. And I think we are looking all around very good. Our opponent throws a creature down. One of the downsides of Nissa is after everything got removed, well, Nissa does use up your lands. Like, that's not ideal. Not necessarily always. So at this stage, we have got ourselves the big Teferi, right? We got small Teferi, all of that good stuff, which is kind of in control and, you know, trying to do our best here. I kind of made a mistake here. I should have set a stop at my opponent's upkeep, which lets me play the for the ratio before their turn. But that's fine. Right now, we're just kind of trying to make sure that we stay alive, which can be a little bit tricky. Anyway, you, I think, have a good idea of what this deck is trying to do now, right? Like, it's really just very straight. I don't know. It's not very straightforward. I guess it is very brutal. It's just devastating. Look at that. Oh, God. At this stage, ideally, we want to win before opponent plays another card. Just kind of stop them from doing anything at all, right? So our opponent is at 8 HP. We have 8 as well. So we're going to go ahead and for the ratio and go and get rid of that before you can play it. Easy peasy. And at this stage, we could use Teferi to, you know, -8, but I saw a way to just kill our opponent, and that seemed less cruel. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This took me a long time to make. It ended up being a bit longer than I really was planning on originally, but no, well, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it helps you a little bit if you're gonna go onto the landscape of Magic the Gathering, right? For as long as this is up to date at the very least. If you did enjoy it, don't forget to leave a rating on the video. Thank you to Wizards of the Coast, to Magic the Gathering for sponsoring this video again. And link down below, try out Magic the Gathering Arena releasing today. And well, I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.